Okay, so for this next function, which is again getting all the historical data values, what I've done to kind of like speed up the process, I've actually created this JSON file on my scripts folder. Now the JSON file contains a dictionary, which again is a combination of the link, which is the reference where I'm actually going to be using the request module to click on that link, which will download a zip file. And for all these 29 different locations that I want to download the historical data from. And also I'm actually naming the file so I can have a same reference for these file names with the reference that I want to use in mat.node data as well, which is all my future forecast. So I want to kind of like have a reference which is exact same in both. So I'm creating my own reference for these locations. So which is again, I'm explaining like these are southeast locations, these are west or Midlands or whatever their information I want to bring it all together. I'm just giving the reference to these. So what I'm actually going to do now is once I have these links, what I'm actually going to do is load this JSON file and use the key and value pairs to actually create a for loop to go through all of these locations, download the zip files, and open the zip files and also look at the actual data that's there in the file. Now again, if I look at one of the locations, now if I show you one of the file itself, how it actually downloads the file, what I'm actually going to do is go back onto my location in the URL, go back into the material and try and download one file. Once I open this, so it's actually a zip file location. So once we open this zip file, the exact format, I want to actually also show you that. I'm actually going to open this into this is a CSV file. So again, as you can see within that folder, you do have multiple files and I only want the CSV. Once I open that into Excel, so as you can see within Excel, that file, once it opens, it does have this sort of like like a reference on top for each of the columns, which I don't really want. So again, which is a location 23. What I've also done in the meantime is looked at all the files, and some of the files depend on which location the files have coming from. Say for an example, if it's an offshore location, it does have different number of features. So I can't even just index based on saying, oh, well, just read the index for the row from 24. So I do have to check all the files, which I've done beforehand. And again, there are 4 different types where the index could change 4 times. So including in that way, what I've done is I know the file names that I want to have on reading on the index 24 or read it on the index 15 or 17. So what I'm actually going to do is within that, I'm going to account for, depending on the file name, I'm actually going to use to read from a specific index. So without wasting any more time, let's start coding to get all the historical data. Okay, so let's go back to our Spider IDE. And within that, I'm actually going to create my new function, which is going to be def get historical weather data. So that should be okay. I'm going to say self, and I'm also going to pass 2 things within this. One is going to be the URL. And what I'm actually going to do for the URL is I'm actually going to pass one as a default, just to make sure we have some default values in there. So I'm going to copy one of these from the top, and then the URL is equal to this. And also what I'm actually going to pass on is the file name, which in this case is the actual value of that key. Okay, so once I do that, that should do. Let's start kind of coding the rest of the stuff, which is again, first of all, I'm actually going to use a request module. So I do need to get all the dependencies. So let's go up and let's write down all the dependencies for this. So I need a module which is import zip files. So actually it's a zip file. And then also I need to import JSON because I will be reading that JSON file to load all the locations on that. So that's okay. We have a zip file, we have JSON. And within that, what I'm actually going to also do is get the import, so like request module. And I'm actually going to also read my JSON file on the top itself. So which is, I'm going to get the name of the file, which is material. I'm going to read that JSON file by doing json.loads, and I'm actually going to say something like open, and I'm actually going to give the path of that absolute location, In this case, I'm just going to copy this path here, which is because we're already in our project directory. So I'm actually just going to pass that script with that JSON file name. Once I do that, I'm actually going to just say call the function with the chaining method, which is .read. Once I do that, that should just read my actual JSON file and save that into this variable. So I'm actually going to run these as well, just to make sure we haven't made any errors. Okay, so that's done now. I'm going to go back to the code itself. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do first is r is equal to my request module dot get, and within that get, I'm actually going to pass the URL, which is the file that which is the actual variable we have created on the function call. Then what I'm actually going to do next is I'm going to open that. So with open was.bot.join. Okay, so before doing that, I'm actually going to go back to my location and create another folder here, where I'm actually going to save all my zip files as well, so which is met. So that should be metern underscore, you can call it maybe something like zip folder, to make sure we are basically saving all the zip files in this folder. And I'm actually going to also create one more, which is metern data. So we are going to save zip files in the zip folder and the actual data into the metern data folder. So we do have these two folders within our data in our directory. So now I'm actually going to go back, and what I'm actually going to do within this is I'm going to pass on that location of that folder, which is my zip folder. And as am I defining in this location here, I do need to pass on that actual link as well up on the directory itself, or the actual absolute path. So this variable here, I'm actually going to go up and create it here, something like self dot met underscore zip folder, which is equal to the absolute path for this location. Once we go back down here, what I'm going to do next is, so within that file, what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to start typing the overall code first, and then I'm actually going to explain it, because that makes much more sense to kind of break it down once we have the whole function typed. Okay, so let me just explain this function to you. So first of all, what I'm doing is I'm actually creating this variable, which is request.get, which is again running the function to call this URL. And with that, what I do first of all is kind of like opening the zip files. So as you can see, I've passed on the zip file folder location, and I'm replacing the actual sort of like this absolute path for that link, which I'm actually opening. So I just get, in the end, what I'm actually replacing it with blank, which means I'm only going to get that file name that I'm after. And what I'm actually doing is I'm writing that file name, which is a zip file, into the location, which is in the metern zip folder. And once I'm actually writing that there, what I'm actually doing is, if you see up here, so what I'm doing is I'm actually writing that zip file into the actual location, which is the zip folder, and just replacing the URL with which is again removing all the rest of the URL, just leaving the file name in it. And that's how I'm actually saving that file. Once I've saved that file, as I've talked before, like each of the file, again, depending on what location we are going after, some data files has the data starting from row 15 or 17 or 19 or 23. So what I did was I created these 4 lists, and I gave them file names which are on the exact within the bucket. And what I'm then doing is I'm basically running this if and elif statement where I'm actually making sure if they belong to the certain file names, just basically used to read CSV, which is again to read that CSV. What I'm doing first of all is because I know they are in a zip file, so I want to make sure I'm opening that I'm unzipping that file. Once I unzip that file, I'm actually making sure replacing the text of the file name from .zip to .csv, which will refer to that exact CSV name. Once I do that, I'm actually opening that and skipping the row, which is again till 15, and then basically loading that file just to kind of like show it based on the actual file itself. So if I look at the actual file, which I was looking in the downloads folder, once I open this, within that zip file, again, if you see the zip file reference and then the CSV file reference is always the same, so that's where the file name remains exact same, but I'm only converting that .zip into .csv extension, which will then refer to the actual file within the folder. And once I do that, basically then I'm actually going to read the CSV file based on skipping the rows depending on what file name it is. Once I do that, then in the end what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going back to the data and data folder, and I'm actually going to load that file up there and also remove any index. I'm not copying the index, and also the file name will be equal to the file name that I've actually defined within my function. So within that function call, what I'm actually going to do then is in the main function call, I'm actually going to run another loop. Because if I look at my JSON file, I do have these 29 file locations, which is a .zip file. Why I'm actually building it in this way? Because these files get updated every month, and I don't want to go back manually and download these 29 files every time. I do want to have a process in place which can actually run every month. So again, I'm thinking as an automation perspective that I'm actually going to run this script, which will download these files on a monthly basis and actually give them the same reference names, which is again the value of this within this dictionary. So as you can see, for loop will go as a reference on that config file. The key is to the I, which will again refer to as for I in sort of like meta config as dict, which means if I actually even run this to show you the value of that. So as you can see, they are all the links which will come up on this location. So that's what I'm doing with my for loop. So I is referred to the actual link itself. And once I say basically meta config dict and I, which means that link, which is again my key, it will give the actual value as the name of the file. So once I do that, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create these two variables, which is key is equal to I, which is a link, value is equal to the actual name of the file. Call my function, and within that function I'm going to pass my URL as the key variable which I created, and the file name which is the value variable that I created. Once I do that and I run these files, it should be able to load all my files, convert them from zip format to actually in a CSV format, and also while it's converting, it's making sure when it's reading the data, it's always reading depending on the file name and then loading that file into the folder location. Now we have completed the whole data collection stage. What I want to do is I want to actually demonstrate it to you that how the whole process will run, and before actually deploying it in the Git source, I'm actually going to just make sure basically leaving all the comments specific to my code, and then I'm actually going to just deploy this code into my GitHub repository. So what I'm actually going to do first of all for this is go back into the folder, go back into my downloads folder. I'm just trying to keep it empty so the whole process runs as scratch. And I'm actually going to go back into my main folder. In my Git folder, I'm actually going to delete all these files as well. And then I'm actually going to go back and I'm actually going to delete all these JSON files that it is reading from the API itself. And let's move them to the bin. And within my met.earn data, there's nothing there. Within my met.no data, there's these 29 files. I'm actually going to delete them as well. So as you can see, all my folders are right now, they're empty. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to run this code and we'll see the data actually getting populated. So again, it should do all three of them together, which means first of all, call the API, bring all these 29 files. Then it should actually go back to using Selenium to actually create that bot and get those 4 files for the demand data, load them into the airgrid_data folder, and then finally you should get all the historical files, which is again all the links which you were using through request module to access those links and download the zip files, convert them and load them into met.earn folder, which is again met.earn data folder here. So without wasting any more time, let's run the whole process and see if there is any errors, just to make sure we are happy with it. So as we can see here, okay, so it's actually downloading. First of all, what we're doing is we're running our historical data. So as I can see within our function, I'm actually going to open my, so as you can see, the files are getting added automatically, which means we are getting our material data done first, which is again, we are downloading zip files and we're getting them converted into CSV files. So that's running perfectly. I don't see any errors on that. Once this task finishes, it should start working on actually getting the system demand data, which means actually running the Selenium on the background. So we're actually going to view that as well. So again, as you can see, while this code is running on the background, it's always a good idea for when you're working on an end-to-end project is to actually work it as that you want to automate this as well in future, and always have that type of thinking, because when we are on the stage of automation of the whole project, we don't have to think at that point, okay, how are we going to run this automatically? If you're building our packages in a format that we can actually use that and reuse work we have done, and then just basically put that into our DAGs or whatever Airflow we want to use or cron jobs we want to use, and we can actually automate the whole task. It's always good to think in that way. So as you can see, once these material data is completed, now I should work on updating our air grid data. So as you can see, it should run through the whole process of clicking the buttons and actually downloading the files. And once it downloads these files, it should actually load these files to the exact folder locations. So we're just going to let it run. If you're doing something similar work for web scraping for yourself in your coding process, you can definitely use something like this. Or if you have some more detailed web scraping in which you don't really have to download files, you have to actually scrape from the website itself. I'll leave some link below. I do have another video which I have created on actually using it for building an Instagram bot. You can maybe use something like that, or I'll leave some link below for where you can use those code to actually do something like web scraping as well by using Selenium. And now that is done, and it should now start loading the process from the API itself. Give a call to API and download all the forecast data. I'm actually going to leave the link below for this repository as well, because we've used this to actually make call to the API. So as again, we've used different processes in this. Again, I hope this kind of video helps you in terms of giving you an understanding of how to, if you're actually bringing the data in your data frame, how to use API, how to use sort of like Selenium to actually download files or actually do web scraping, or how to actually go into using request module to actually download it from specific links. So I hope this type of video does help you in terms of give you that type of understanding when you're coding and building the process for data collection. Just to make sure the function actually ran correctly. Yeah, so the function ran correctly. There was no errors and the function finished running. So we have all our data files updated into a specific locations. If I actually go back into my directories, as you can see, these are the location calls that were being made. So it saves the files in a JSON format as well. And as you can see, the air grid data is there. Now again, that's because obviously I've run that file twice. I didn't delete the files from the downloads folder, but yeah, we can do that as well. Now that data is here, and then we can also look at that we do have all the material data as well updated, which is all the 29 files. These are our 29 zip files, and these are the data files from the API itself, the calls we made to actually get from the exact location. And as you can see, what I've done so far is I've kept the reference of the file same, so I can actually merge them while I'm actually working on the cleaning process. So the next thing what we are going to do is we are going to actually start doing some sort of repository updates. So I'm actually going to open my GitHub account. In this, I'm actually going to build one new repository. And I'm actually going to just call the exact same, which is DS project. Okay, so within this repository file, what I'm actually going to do is bring up my terminal, and we are going to start running these commands. So first of all, we're going to create this Readme file. We're in our project directory already, so we can just start running these commands itself. So git init, we are going to initialize git here. Okay, so once git is initialized, what I'm actually going to do next is I'm actually going to make git add next. Just to kind of give you a bit of reference beforehand. So again, as you can see within this code, again, this is a really good representation of how we actually use Git. So within the Git, what I'm actually going to do in first of all is I'm actually going to do something like git add all the files that I want to add within my, it will actually save into my folder location. Then I'm actually going to do git commit, which will actually put them files into my local repository. And then I'm actually going to do git push, which will actually push the information into a remote repository. But before actually pushing it into a remote repository, which is your online GitHub account, I do want to actually create the remote link as well. So we are going to do that, as all the descriptions are already mentioned in this here. So the next thing we're going to do is git add and I'm actually going to say git add dot, which means actually load all the files, not specific folders or files. Actually, you can just start doing our first commit. So let's copy these statements. Don't really have to write them again. So git add, that's my first commit. Okay, so once we do that, all the commits are done. Then I'm actually going to create a branch, which is my main branch of this. Okay, so as you can see, the master branch is now converted to the main branch. Once I've done that, I'm actually going to create my remote link so I can start deploying these files as we looked at in this picture here. What we are doing now is we have already committed it, so it's all saved into our local repository. Next, before pushing it, I do have to create this remote link. So that's what we are going to create now, which is this git remote add origin, and then we are giving that link of that repository. Once I do that, now the link has been created. Next, what I can do is I can actually just push this. So once I'm actually pushing this, as you can see, the files are now loading into my actual remote repository, which is in my GitHub account. Once this task actually finishes, now again, it might take slightly more time. So I'm actually going to just fast forward this video because this might take time because we are loading all the data files as well. So as you can see, the uploading is now finished. If I go back onto my page of my repository, so once I refresh this page, as you can see, all the files are now uploaded on the location, which is my data and source, which is my script. If I open that, I do have my script here, which is one is in a JSON format and the other one is the .py file. And I also have all my data files updated into data folder, which is again, as you can see up here. So now all the process for data collection is finished. In the next video, what we are going to do is we're going to do data cleaning, in which we're actually going to take these three sources, which are at the moment they are separate, and I want to actually combine them all together and create one file. Now, we do have some challenges again within some files are actually on a 15-minute interval, some files are on a 1-hour interval. And we do have to kind of like make sure that all the actual files have exact same feature names, and they are all because again we are combining two different files, which is one is historic and which is one is future weather forecast. We want to combine them together and also bring all the other information and basically have one file format, which is again in the end we don't really want to use multiple files. We should only have one project data file, which again holds all the data and it's all cleaned. So next video we are going to start cleaning within this project series. I hope you're kind of enjoying this kind of series and you're getting some sort of value out of it. This video was just more linked towards giving you more understanding of how to collect data, and as in this video we kind of focused more on having it in a proper process format, which means that once we are automating this, we do have created all the scripts in a way that we can actually easily go back and automate the whole pipeline. So that was the idea behind this, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like the content that I'm providing, give it a thumbs up to the video. It definitely helps me to grow this channel, and do share with other people as well who might be seeking for some advice or also trying to start up their own project, and this project series might help them or give them some sort of understanding of how to run a project from end to end. And do subscribe to my channel for my next upcoming video. Again, click on the notification sign as well so you get notification for my next video within this project series. So I hope you enjoy all the content that I'm providing. And if you have any other questions, leave it in the comment box below, and do check out my other videos as well. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.